some very simple questions like how did you get here and kind of what was your journey to the place you're at today?
So, how did I get here? It was really by magic, to be really honest with you. I was the city auditor for over 10 years for the city and county of San Francisco. And if you follow any of our news, which I'm sure you do, the housing authority became under default with the federal government. It is funded fully by the federal government. And in 2019, we were in budget shortfall. So we had overspent our funds, our credit card limit, if you will. And we were in default of the two contracts that we had around public housing and our HCV program. So what did that mean? The federal government literally was going to come in and take over the program. And that really would not have been feasible because the reality is San Francisco had a bond and had really done a lot of work around public housing and going into a public-private partnership under the RAD program, which is called the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. And so the city has really invested many dollars into revamping public housing. So when I went to the housing authority, I literally was supposed to be there 1 year and I was supposed to go back. Well, 6 years later, almost June of this year, I will have been at the housing authority for 6 years. And I would like to tell you, and I say this with great just happiness, if you will, and I'm very honored to be in this position. And we have over 15,000 residents. And I will tell you, I love each and every one of them. And I go to bed with them on my mind and I wake up because housing is extremely important. And there is a lot of policy that we have to deal with. We also have many stringent laws that we must follow in the work that I do each and every day. We literally put out over $400 million, $430 million annually in housing subsidy. And so I have the opportunity to serve the most under income. I don't like to say low income, but the most under income individuals in our city. And being able to provide housing is so critical, as we all know. And so that's how I got to where I am today. And when I went to the housing authority, they were really shocked. They're like, oh, now we have an auditor. So what does that mean? And I'll be honest, when I went to the housing authority, because the housing authority is not a city department, we had never audited that department. And I did not know the housing policy, but I know how to follow money. And every unit equals dollars, and you get paid for each and every one of those units. And so through that methodology, I was able to really unravel our system around getting us out of default, getting us out of shortfall. So within 12 months, we were out of default with the federal government. 6 months later, we were out of budget shortfall. Over the last, I know I have slides, and it's so much easier to talk about it. Let's see. Sure. So we have in our portfolio over 9,000 units and what we call non-RAD and RAD. And so this gives you a picture of where they are throughout the city. And our non-RAD, our RAD sites are former public housing sites. And so because of the underfunding of the federal government, and not having enough budget, those sites were not maintained in the ways that they should have been. And so we went into public partnership about 10 years ago with different nonprofit organizations who now manage those sites, who literally own the asset, but the housing authority still owns the land. And the importance about the housing authority owning the land is that land says that any assets on that land must be deeply affordable and it can never be changed. And that is really significant and extremely important, right? And so then where you see where we have non-RAD project-based voucher sites, so those are subsidies or vouchers, if you will, that are sitting in different properties that maybe the San Francisco has developed or other companies have developed, and we have put out an RFP, a request for proposal, where we have awarded vouchers so that others can live in these places. And when you have a RAD site or non-RAD site, what we call a project-based voucher, those vouchers never leave the unit. They always stay with the unit. You can't take them away with you. So if a family decides that they don't want to live there and maybe they're transferred to another site, but that subsidy stays on that unit. So, oh, I have it. And over the last 3 years, remember, we were in shortfall, we were in default, and that meant that the Housing Authority could not issue one voucher without permission from HUD. And so any vouchers that during the time that we were in default that we issued, those were emergency vouchers. There was something going on where a family needed to be moved for safety reasons. And so over the last several years, this is the change in our voucher program. So over the last 3 years, we were able to add 3,254 new families into our program. And so our program, you just can't walk in and say, I need housing, and oftentimes we think that it's really simple to house individuals. We have rules and restrictions. And in order to be considered for our subsidy, you have to get on a wait list. And so I just wanted to show you that when we opened our wait list for what we call our Housing Choice Voucher Program, and to some of you, you might know that as Section 8. When we opened up that wait list, we had over 52,000 individuals who applied for housing. And when we opened up our project-based voucher wait list, which are tied to specific units, we had over 20,000 individuals apply. And when we do that, we have now a lottery system where we go through a whole process where we have certain metrics that we use. It's how many vacant units we have, how many individuals or families do we project that are going to come out of the system. And we just use a host of data that we have available to us to determine how many names will we take and put on the actual active wait list. And so when we had our tenant-based voucher program open in 23, we only took 6,500 families. And can you imagine that? And we had over 50,000 families that applied. And for our project-based voucher, we almost took half, 10,000. And the reason why we can't put everyone on the wait list is wait lists become stale. And it's very problematic. So when I came to the Housing Authority, we had individuals on our wait list for more than 20 years. And in order to move the wait list along, it took us a year to go through the wait list because we have to notice people, we have to give them a certain amount of time, then we have to do another notice, and we have to do another notice. And so when you have that kind of process in place, it's a federal process, it's a mandate, then what happens is it makes it hard, especially on the project-based voucher side, to fill the units because those wait lists are stale, but we have to wait for people to respond. We also have to be very careful not to violate the federal housing laws as well. So there's a lot that goes around the program. And it's not as simple as you apply, I give you a voucher, and you get to go. There's a lot of work behind it and a lot of requirement.
This is amazing because we're trying to build an interim village and we want to be tied into that lottery system and have candidates moving on to permanent housing from our program. So it's really important for us to kind of build out those relationships. I know that we're under a time constraint today. So I know there might be some questions. We're going to save them all for Michelle because Michelle's really smart and she can answer any question for Tonia. We're going to try and stump her. But I know you have to get to the other side of San Francisco. First of all, we want to thank you for our first ever conversation, but we're going to have many with you in the
Thank you.
future. Thank you so much for your time.
Running for board meeting.
She's got her priorities. She knows who goes first. Okay. So we actually have another guest we wanted to bring up here, Cassandra, Supervisor Cassandra.
Well, good day, everybody.
Hi, Cassandra. So I'm going to give you the slide deck because you are not from San Francisco. You are, but you're not. So tell us a little bit about what you did in the past because you were part of our San Francisco community. And today, where are you?
Actually, I was born in the Presidio. So I was born at Letterman Army Medical Center, one of the last humans born here in the 80s. And speaking of Section 8, I grew up in public housing in San Francisco. So I grew up in Bayview Hunters Point, by the way of what we know, Harbor Road, Double Rock. And I recently worked at MoCD, the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, and I oversaw the RAD program. So, and as of January, I was sworn in as Board of Supervisor in Solano County. So I consider myself a displaced San Franciscan who is now causing trouble, good trouble in a different county.
Yes. And Solano and San Francisco are while we're close and neighbors, oftentimes they're completely two different cultures or two different kinds of environments. San Francisco, we are really compressed and we're landlocked on three sides by water, which limits our ability to expand. Solano County, especially in the Vallejo area, not so much. I mean, it has a lot more room to expand. Tell us a little bit about the difference between housing here and housing there and kind of the challenges you see in one place versus the other.
So Solano County is the last affordable county in the Bay Area. So when we're talking about displaced San Franciscans, a lot of them end up in Solano County, specifically Vallejo. And Vallejo is the last largest city in the Bay Area with the waterfront. So we do have two sides that is surrounded by the waterfront, but Vallejo is underdeveloped. Unlike San Francisco, we don't like high buildings, and I say we because as a Vallejoan, don't like high buildings. So there is space to develop housing. Also, there are not as Solano County and Vallejo is not resource rich. So in San Francisco, there are many programs that work with people along the housing ladder. Whether you are on the verge of becoming unhoused, if you are unhoused and you're re-entering housing, there is a whole coordinated entry system here that is not in Vallejo. And we are having conversations around that. And I would say, well, Dr. T, not only is she the CEO of the San Francisco, or Dr. Tonia, excuse me, is not only the CEO of the San Francisco Housing Authority, but I am blessed to have her elected to the Vallejo City Council. So she is also our councilwoman and when I say we often work together, where we're changing the conversation around housing. So we have a fairgrounds that is underdeveloped. Our waterfront is underdeveloped, and there are historically excluded communities that it was a subset back in the 50s and 60s, but you could still develop either single family homes or multifamily homes in these very communities. And let me know before I start just running my mouth.
So you got this.
Oh, I just,
You got your slides here.
Okay.
I just wanted to maybe ask just one follow-up question on the housing front is, what do you see as the biggest barriers to dealing with the housing challenges in the region and in Solano County specifically as it relates to San Francisco?
As it relates to Sanford, well, one, I just want to say that Solano County and Vallejo in particular is one of the most diverse. Vallejo is one of the most diverse cities across the nation. And again, we have become the hub or the safe place for displaced San Franciscans. And we are seeing in a quarter of our county, so more than 115,000 people commute to San Francisco every day. I'm hearing that y'all have to go back to work 5 days a week now. So every day in order to just to go to work. And that means that we have 115,000, if we say $1 per person, $115,000 dollars that is leaving the county on a daily basis because people come to San Francisco, they spend here, they shop here, they eat here, and then they're coming back home to just go to sleep. So we're not receiving the dollars in the sense of what comes to San Francisco. And as far as housing, when we're talking about housing, San Francisco again is the center of the Bay Area, although Vallejo is the heart. We don't receive as much funding as San Francisco does. So working in RAD or working at MoCD, we received there was several thousands of dollars that came through MoCD to do some pilot programming for those who are living in former public housing sites, or also known as RAD sites. When Vallejo or Solano County apply for the same dollar, they only get cents on the dollar. And this is proven through the data that was shared by the United Way Bay Area that works with all 9 Bay Area counties. Hopefully I answered your question. Yes. So on this slide, I'm just giving like a quick glance because there was a report from 2018 to 2020 about the disparities in the Bay Area, and then there was an update through the first 5. So with Solano County, when we're talking about the highest need, and it ties to San Francisco, San Francisco is one of the 4 counties with the highest need, also Solano County as well. But when we're looking at the amount that San Francisco gets compared to Solano County, we cannot effectively address the housing needs or expand our housing ladder in the sense that San Francisco can. And I know that covered it, and that's what I get for doing it through Canva. But Solano County, Solano and San Francisco, we have the same score as 2.5 with our high needs. But we receive 75 million versus San Francisco's $9 billion. And we can't say it's based off of size, because although San Francisco does have a higher population than Solano County and Vallejo, however, they receive more money than the largest county in the Bay Area.
I'm looking at the 4 cities up there that all have 2.5.
Mhm.
So Alameda, Oakland,
Yes.
Marin County, which kind of surprises me, San Francisco, and then Solano.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and quite with Marin, they have it's called the Triangle, and that's their historically excluded community that has been that has not had access to some of the resources. The same thing that was happening in San Francisco. So they are now moving to the RAD model to rehab some of their public housing sites. And they are working, I just connected them to my old supervisor. So they're working with MoCD to help them with the blueprint to move forward in their RAD journey.
So this is amazing. At first, I like the heat map over here. It's hard to see, but it is pretty interesting that Napa's got that area here. Didn't realize it, that zone up there.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. So San Francisco, tell us, like, what did you used to do for the city, and what were some of the challenges you used to run into when you were managing from the mayor's office, some of the challenges in the city?
So with the city, I've always worked in San Francisco. So from nonprofits, I used to work in the TL or the Tenderloin with Community Housing Partnership. They're now, I think, Home Rise. I worked with the Center for Young Women's Development, working with young women involved in the underground street economy or in lockup. They're now called the Young Women Freedom Center. And then I went over to the dark side and started working for government uh, with the Department of Public Health, where I was in the medical respite program. I was one of the health workers, and this was a cost-saving program for when you have frequent flyers who are unhoused, and they will get an ambulance to go to the hospital, but yet they were too well to stay in the hospital, but still too sick to go to back to the street. So the medical respite, which is a transitional like healthcare system, would house them there. And that's where I really got the understanding of expanding the housing ladder. So it's not just going from the streets back into housing. We have to transition some folks back into housing. And from that department, I went on to working at all these was promotions. So I wasn't just hopping around. The Human Services Agency, or HSA, where I was a senior eligibility worker determining CalFresh and Medi-Cal, but I worked in the navigation center. And I worked at one of the navigation centers with the only space for transgender residents there. And some of the challenges at the navigation center specifically was that housing is so fluid and our population is so fluid, but the rules are rigid. And we had to be, and when I say we partnered with the home nonprofit that was there, and we had to partner with several departments to really meet the needs of some of the residents that was at the navigation center. And even with like CalFresh and Medi-Cal, looking at the loopholes so people will have access to adequate medical insurance so they can continue to either get whatever treatment or see the doctor. And from there, I went on to MoCD at the mayor's office. I went initially as a temporary because MoCD had just received the Season of Sharing program. And San Francisco, of all places, was underspending the Season of Sharing. So we were not getting out rental assistance fast enough. So with the Season of Sharing program, and one of the challenges there was, as diverse as San Francisco is, we tend to focus on specific areas. And we weren't meeting the needs. And we only thought about diversity in the form of language. So we had to really expand our thought process in talking about diversity and language as in culturally competent. Like, how do I get to the grandmas that live in Russian Hill? How do I get to the kids that were in the TLs? How do I get to the aunties that were in Bayview? And looking at the partners in the city who had the relationships with them. And in that program, we were able to expand our partners from 10 to over 33 organizations because we wanted to make sure that not only, again, we spoke Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Cantonese, Mandarin, English, Ebonics, but we also met the aunties who could not make it to do the interview. So the organizations that stayed open later, or that went to the churches, or that went to the cultural celebrations and was okay with doing the tabling there. So it was really, again, having to be creative within our, and we also pushed back on Season of Sharing in the San Francisco Chronicle as well, because at first their rules was you can only apply once every 3 years. It's only $3,000. You had to be a survivor of domestic violence or have a child. It was really rigid. So we fought back to expand being a survivor of violence, whether it was community violence or intimate partner violence, expanding if you are unhoused, but you are a couple, because oftentimes if you're unhoused couple, you aren't eligible for some services. So ensuring that they added that language in there. And I did that for a year before, again, promotions, going over to overseeing the RAD portfolio. And the RAD was one of the most difficult things that we had to do because it's the partnership with the federal government. And as what Dr. T was saying, the rules again are rigid. In San Francisco, we like to push back on the rules or even break some of the rules, and having to find the loopholes to ensure that our community owner operators each unit does cost money, so that they receive the money to maintain the units, but we could bring in the community-based organizations to really help help families break their generational trauma or address some of that generational trauma. Sorry, that was long-winded.
So you have a pretty insightful view into the San Francisco landscape. Was there like one or two organizations you think did an amazing job in terms of really helping San Francisco address, which is a huge problem, unhoused individuals? We can't solve it for everyone at this point, but were there a couple of organizations you think were just doing an amazing job in terms of getting out there and creating space for folks?
Yes. One was the San Francisco Housing Development Corporation, or SFHDC. And the reason why I said that, because they provided financial literacy. They help people transition back into housing, and they oversaw one of the RAD portfolios. They made sure that folks can stay housed by having access to several like rental assistance, portals. And there are some folks who were eligible for Section 8 vouchers, but because they had bad credit, they couldn't access the vouchers. So what they did was they created what is it called, a financial and economic team or committee, where they provided financial literacy for some of our households to improve their credit, so that way they can move out of public housing. And the other one is CCDC, Chinatown Community Development Corporation. And they did such an amazing job by maintaining the culture of community, but also, again, working with the different households so that they can stay housed, or that they could be housed successfully. Because again, when people get access to housing, it's different from, you have to follow rules now versus when you're unhoused. So they really gave folks an adjustment period to adjust to the rules of housing, but they also partnered with the Housing Authority and MOCD to bring the resources to their developments, so that way people can do their recertification, because you have to recert every year with RAD and with Housing Authority. So they could do their recertification. They provided language translation so people can have access to their Social Security benefits or whatever income that they were receiving. And they also partnered with the larger community overall to be able to bring like different food programs in, et cetera. But those two were some amazing organizations.
So our group likes to get involved in the community. Are there community groups that you were pretty impressed with that made themselves available to help individuals? You talked about a navigation center. Was that navigation center available for volunteerism? Did you have a list of volunteers you could reach out to that were participating in other programs? Give us some guidance, like where would someone from our community be able to tie in to help with San Francisco?
I would say one of the organizations or that come to mind for me is the FRH. Sorry, I live in the acronym soup, and I'm trying to think of their full name. But FRH, they are the agency, but they work with Tabernacle Community Center. And they mainly work in Fillmore, and they're in all the public housing sites in Fillmore. They always put on amazing events for the community, whether it's like Easter, Christmas, turkey drives. And they also, again, they provide additional services they teach the seniors. They have a computer class for seniors. They try to outreach to get some like iPads for students. And there are a couple of kids that are at like SF State that lives in this very community. So like pulling together the resources to make sure that they could be successful. So that's one, FRH. And then the other one is I could think of SF Black Wall Street. SF Black Wall Street has it's called a Millionaire Development Program, and it's for small entrepreneurs in San Francisco. And they put on events throughout San Francisco after for their trainees or for their program graduates, so that way their business can be highlighted. And they can help them course correct some of the things as being a new business. And they have those events throughout San Francisco. So
I think we had that founder here, I want to say like a year ago. That was amazing. He was a great individual that was kind of driving that whole process.
yes.
So questions, yeah.
I have a question, and not to put you on the spot, Supervisor Cassandra, but just broadly, thinking around, given the budget crisis that we have, and it doesn't seem like there's an immediate solution in sight around budget challenges, not only in San Francisco but even regionally across the 9 Bay Area counties. What is the thinking today, and what are some of the top of mind conversations that are happening at the elected level, right, around solutions given the budget constraints? What are some of the ideas that are being thrown out there right now around how to tackle the coordinated entry challenges that you're seeing, not only in San Francisco, but also in Solano County and other Bay areas, and then around housing and transitional housing?
So regionalism is a hot topic right now amongst elected officials, and how do we reach it beyond our borders? So with the Bay Area, we are we have the amazing Bay, but we don't have a committee surrounding like Bay resources. So that's one of the conversations, especially with the budget restraints, because there is money there, we just don't access it. Another one is creating a regional housing safety network. So again, we're being as the safety hub for displaced San Franciscans, Oakland, and Richmond. Like, how do we leverage some of the organizations that are in San Francisco and Oakland and Richmond to provide services for those folks who are now in Vallejo? Because people who live in Vallejo, we don't have the resources, so they now come back to the city to access some of those services. So it's getting beyond the border, so that way we can access collectively some of the resources as a Bay Area region. And then I know that some of us are partnering together, like for Solano specifically, we're partnering with Sonoma and Napa in regards to the immigration and our rapid response network. And Alameda County, San Francisco, and San Mateo often partner in regards to creating more affordable housing initiatives. So these are things.
And just one more slide. Oh, look at the data.
Data. I am a data person. Yes. So, and the reason why is I want some of y'all sandwich. I want some of y'all money. So, but as you can see, like when we're talking about grant dollars overall, I know Paul told me, and I'm gonna say it, and you could correct me, Paul. I always say fail forward, but the correct term, fast learning. So fast learning can happen when you have the dollars to do it. We are when we're talking about philanthropy dollars, we have the richest foundations in the nation that are in the Bay Area. So when we're talking about fast learning and being able to put programs in place to ensure that we can have like a regional coordinated entry, for example, it will be great if Solano County could get a couple of more dollars. And again, this is why we want to work beyond our borders. So that way we can really leverage what is happening. And we have the highest percentage of families in poverty. So when we're looking at the area median income, it is lower than San Francisco, but we know Bay Area overall, a family of 4 making $130,000 or less is living in poverty. and we can have a collective conversation, maybe depending if this administration will be open to it. But we often we use the federal poverty limit, which we know in the Bay Area, our working poor makes more than the federal poverty limit due to our minimum wage, and even in California. So as the 9 Bay Area counties, how do we really effectively come together, have conversation around expanding the eligibility for services? And we could do some fast learning if we get some of them dollars too.
It's going to be good. So you guys Solano is opportunity rich.
Yes, we are opportunity
Okay.
rich. I am learning.
I'm trying to get that. So, and it is one of the areas that I know that folks like Ted, I think there's Ted in the background, really want to see Solano really gather its resources and make that ask and really be a part of the regional efforts that we have going on here in the Bay Area. So I know there's some
Yes.
opportunities. Would you be open to allowing us to ask some questions about both San Francisco and the Bay Area in terms of setting up those regional pieces?
Yes,
That
I'm
would be
open.
great.
And I'll also invite you to Vallejo via the ferry. We have an amazing waterfront. So always come out to Vallejo by ferry, and more than willing to take you on a tour or lunch of our amazing city and county. I'm not open to questions. I'm just playing, Ted.
Yeah, I just had an hour with you and I was just warming up. That was great. I have a question. I have multiple questions, but I'll just ask kind of the first set. Is there anything like the House of Web3 in Vallejo? And what would it take to make something like that happen? It seems like, Vallejo is ripe and like attracting Web3, could be a very great strategy.
There is opportunity. Well, we don't have anything like this in Vallejo, and there is opportunity for there. We have a lot of vacant buildings where we can revitalize some of those buildings. We have an amazing downtown, what we talked about earlier, that can be revitalized with a lot of small mom and pop shops. But this would be amazing to have in Vallejo, especially as the heart of the Bay, because people travel through Vallejo, whether you're going to the capital or coming back to the city.
And a follow-up question. Are you familiar with Yes in God's Backyard? The policy, I think it was pioneered in Berkeley, where they partner with the faith community who often have land assets to make it very easy for them to build affordable housing on their property. And are there any projects like that in Vallejo that you're aware of? Or
Yes, I am familiar with it, and I actually sat on the panel for one in San Francisco, or the NOFO that went out for San Francisco. And there aren't any projects like that happening in Vallejo. Again, we're at the baseline of where we are starting a campaign to really explain that homelessness is not monolithic. And we're starting to expand the conversation of what is affordable housing in Vallejo. And that would be the amazing amazing to bring to Vallejo, because we are a church-rich city that does own, that some of our churches own a lot of land.
So I had a question on, and I guess it's an observation over time, was that, we've seen in San Francisco a lot of where the housing was, the closing down and then moving people out into Solano County, Richmond, other areas. How is there a coordination with that? It doesn't seem like funds follow when that is occurring. And, I was just kind of curious. You started to touch upon it a little bit of just that regionalization, but just that whole coordination of, as you start to displace populations, the funds following also is like, is that not happening?
No, that's not happening at all. So when we're talking about funding, when people say the Bay Area, they don't include Solano County, although we're one of the 9 Bay Area counties, right? And when we're talking about culture, if I can say that, I grew up in the hyphy movement. E40, who's the ambassador of the Bay, was born and raised in Vallejo. And we oftentimes we enjoy him at the Warriors games and everything else. And he's a Vallejo kid. So what we have seen, or the trend, is funds have skipped over Solano County and went to Central Valley. And I think we are one of the only counties that have identity, I would say two identities. We are a Bay Area county, but we do have Central Valley vibes. And it's having these conversations with philanthropists and foundations, and again, with our larger community and neighbors, and letting them know that a quarter, because a lot of people don't know, a quarter of our county commute back to San Francisco. We are the last affordable Bay Area county for people to actually buy a home. And we are one of the most diverse. We are the most diverse county in the Bay Area, where we can keep that culture here, but the dollars don't necessarily follow.
Hello, thank you
Hi.
for the work that you do. I was born and raised in Vallejo, so this is really special for me. I coordinate the Street Outreach DAO, so we kind of learn from the best outreach organizations in the Bay Area. We volunteer with Vallejo Together, and I was curious if you were in the know about the navigation center that is hopefully going to open soon in Vallejo.
Fingers crossed. So I actually used to sit on the board of Vallejo Together,
Okay.
and as still an advisor to the board. And the navigation center has been pushed back due to several things, but we had an audit that came out, and if I could be completely honest, when we're talking about workforce, our workforce do not have that in-depth knowledge when we're talking about housing. And this is a public record, and it was in the newspaper. The audit finding was that our staff, our city staff, was inept, and that's why the project took so long to move forward. So Dr. T actually has requested from the city manager an update on the project, and I could be sure to send the information to Paul or Michelle about that. But we're hoping that it will be open by the end of the year, that one and the Broadway project.
Just one question around this idea around coordinated entry and regionalism, and really having the Bay Areas really try to work better together, sharing information. Is there, has there been any conversations around, or interest around sharing more data in the spirit of learning fast, as Paul had mentioned, and also failing fast so that you can pivot? Like, has there been any conversation around data sharing or system sharing or resource sharing around coordinated entry and housing?
There's been conversation around resource sharing as far as housing. Solano County is bad at data. So this is one of the things that we really need help with, is collecting the data, having accurate data, but then disaggregating the data as well. So we often look to San Francisco or Alameda County to see like how data is used and how we can collect the data in our region. But resource sharing is always a conversation.
I think I could probably give you a little help on the data
I come through, Data Queen.
side with San Francisco, just sharing some best practices. So I'd be happy to share what we did there.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Was there anything from your navigation center efforts in Vallejo that you think would be a good idea in San Francisco? I know that there's an interest on our side to see a centralized navigation center kind of recreated to really help individuals that are not hunting around different parts of San Francisco to get different services, but having a place where you can have a concierge walk you around, introduce you to those organizations in a central place.
So with the navigation center, the one in Vallejo Navigation Center was modeled after San Francisco, the one on Deviz. And I often say the one place where a person could go to is your public benefits office. So whether you're getting Medi-Cal, CalFresh, or GA, that office should be the hub for navigating these services because you have to go there in order to continue your benefits. And it would be great, and HSA can partner with like a nonprofit or partner with an entity to bring them in their building to provide, because you see the people with the phones up front. Or you may see somebody with like their pamphlets up front. You can share information with HSA in those buildings so that people can access the different services throughout San Francisco. And that's a centralized, well, you have your main building on Mission and Harrison Street. However, they have satellite sites throughout the city and in every community. So that will be your one place.
Hi, thank you. Question for you in the audience. We look at housing and unhousing as a poverty problem, but we're an extremely rich nation, both statewide and federal-wide. And as we conquered this land and committed the atrocities we did to take it over, everybody got a bit of land. And, and as we conquered the final frontier, moved to the west, and there were all these promises, 40 acres and a mule and whatnot. But I had, for a long time, tried to have a movement towards giving assets to people in the form of land to every citizen of every race based on the census. And California owns a lot of state land and the federal system as well. So if everybody was given an asset base, which is what the pioneers got when they got their land that they were given or conquered, that this land, wherever it is, could be borrowed against, could be pulled to build towns, etc. So, for example, all of these post offices in the Bay Area, federally owned, they're all flat, parking, etc. They could be redeveloped with post offices and housing on top. That's a rich view of the world as opposed to a scarcity view of the world. So if we all had an asset base, and California leads, we could lead with a proposal that we all sign in where the land owned by California is auctioned off to all Californians, as we used to call them, and we all have the equivalent of $250,000 in some asset in land, God knows somewhere, based on an auction, and that's a rich base against you can borrow and do building of housing, building an economic foundation that Black communities didn't get because of redlining and because of all kinds of lending discrimination, and equally for the Latino community, certainly the Native Americans. But anyhow, maybe that's something we could do big picture with these things that we do in California that we all sign for. And these assets, they're held in a book. It's not like it's not like we're borrowing against land that's sitting nowhere. It's just land that belongs to all of us. It could be done federally or statewide.
That's an interesting thought. Anybody else? Question down. Here we go.
Cassandra, thank you for coming all this way. I'm right here. Yeah. Thank you for coming this afternoon, all this way from Vallejo to really educate us. It's been an education all the time coming here to listen to speakers, and you've definitely done that. So I grew up in the projects too, in San Francisco. I don't know if you remember, there used to be a big projects in North Beach on
The
Bay
old
Street.
North Beach projects.
yeah.
My aunt lived there.
Yeah.
So
And when you were speaking, it reminded me that material goods are not always everything. I mean, they help, but you got a high concentration of people like in the projects where you had mentioned just in passing the brokenness in the families. Sometimes that community of brokenness spilled over into each other, and individuals start hurting each other within that community that people outside don't know anything about. And that gets passed on generationally as well. And so when I was living there, I realized there were a lot of other organizations that cities don't work with necessarily, like churches or other groups that are addressing more of the kind of mental and spiritual darkness or holes that are there. But I don't see a whole lot of partnerships with those organizations. And I was just wondering how you felt about that, and how that could be something that could be tapped more intentionally. There's a reluctance, it seems. I feel that. But when I reflect on the kids who grew up with that influence, the positive role models, the mental health well-being that was addressed through those organizations, they thrived. But the young people that were my friends who didn't get that, they either went to prison or they're dead. And so I anecdotally I see that from my own experience, and it's powerful. I was just wondering how you felt about that.
No, that was the same for me. I was raised in the church. So that's how I was able. I've had friends that have never left Bayview or that has never seen the beach. And I have other friends that have traveled the world. And it was because of the faith-based or the churches that we went to Vacation Bible School. They took us on field trips throughout the Bay Area. And then you had like the Young Scholars program that does not work with government, but they took us on college tours. Um, it is not necessarily, people always think that you have to go to like the politicians, but it's going to the like government employees that implement the policies. And I think that was the like blessing for me, like doing RAD. Um, it I was successful in doing RAD because I didn't have to worry about the noise of politics. Like I was union too, so they had to go through arbitration to get rid of me. So that's how I took it. But I was able to work with some of the lesser known organizations and the churches to say, hey, Miss blah blah is acting up and I know that she has a relationship with you. Pastor, can you come in and can we do this session? I think that we really need to tap into some of the employees that and the organizations, because the organizations know some of the employees, whether they're eligibility workers or they're community development specialists, wherever they are, to really forge that partnership. And you can always bring, again, as I'm learning, electeds like good ideas and like successful models. And you can always bring it up to them once they see that is successful. Yes.
So I understand that the rapper E40 endorsed you, and that was significant for you, winning. You were outspent 2-1, but you beat the, heir apparent. And can you just tell us more about how you met him and why he chose to endorse you?
Yes. So I was running against what is equivalent to the Aliotos of Solano. And with E40, he does an annual event in Vallejo, annual Christmas giveaway, and he donates to several nonprofit organizations. One of them being the Boys and Girls Empowerment Group, and the executive director, he is affectionately known as the mayor of the Crest. And the Crest is equivalent to like Bayview, or like my boys call him, Uncle Lando. And we went to one of the Christmas giveaway, and we were talking about just changing the changing landscape of the Bay Area and how folks are now moving to Vallejo, not having the social capital or the political capital to really navigate community. And when speaking with him, because he, again, born and raised, and he was raised Sonoma Magazine, south of Vallejo, and really talking to him about like a vision of Vallejo and representation and what that means for our particular communities and why we have not seen, for me, why we have not seen our county and city progressively move forward is because people are scared to learn fast. Uh, and that conversation, he was like, this is my first time ever doing an endorsement, but I'm inspired by your story. I'm inspired by what the possibility of what can happen here. And he endorsed me and he did a video as well. And I was so excited. And he follows me on Instagram. So this is me being a fan. But that's how that's how I ended up coming across E40 and having the conversation and merging. And also we had a larger conversation around politics, policy, and culture. again, the Bay Area, we are so culturally diverse and we love our culture here. And and sometimes people don't pay attention to the politics. It's boring. But people always pay attention to the culture. So how do we merge those conversations together so that way we could get some of these important things done?
As a follow-up question, have you talked or thought or of anything you would do in partnership with him now that you're elected to continue along these streams?
Yes, we did have two follow-up conversations around what would like economic development look like in Vallejo, and he's interested in bringing um, different partners and having the conversation to highlight. And that's why I talked to Ted earlier, and we were talking about the power of the and I'm partnering with local community, the mom and pop shops, but also big business as well to really look at how can we successfully change or bring in like an economic boost to the area. And again, it was a simple conversation because he has several businesses. And we're like, it'll be great to highlight one of these businesses here or have it here. We have a vacant downtown. We have a vacant, a lot of our buildings are vacant in the city of Vallejo. So it'll be great to bring some of these ideas and stuff. And I know we have to deal with our public safety and we got to deal with some of this other stuff, but that could be funded through like the different initiatives.